This week, we read the story of Tamar and Judah. While this episode can seem like an interruption to the longer Joseph saga, it is a defining moment for our people. First, Tamar teaches real-world righteousness, not an abstract conception of justice, but righteousness in the downtrodden's messy struggle for self-betterment. And second, through this episode, we learn the essential lesson that our duty to the vulnerable people for whom we are responsible comes first. If we don't do right by the people closest to us, the people who rely on us, our story will go no further. Tamar is a widow. Her husband was killed by God, we don't know why. Now, because she has no children, the biblical rule of levirate marriage requires her brother-in-law to marry her. Levirate marriage served two functions. First, to carry on the bloodline of the deceased brother. The woman's firstborn son would be attributed to her first husband. And second, to protect the widow. Since women could not inherit or own property, the fate of a woman without a formal male provider was precarious. Only remarriage or a son would secure a widow's financial protection. So Tamar marries her brother-in-law. He comes to bed with Tamar, but we read, knowing that the offspring would not be his, he wastes his seed. He uses Tamar for sexual gratification, but neglects his duty to her. For this, God puts him too to death. Tamar's father-in-law, Judah, tells her that she can marry his third son after he grows up. But Judah secretly blames Tamar for the deaths of his first two sons and is loath to give her his sole remaining child. At this point, Judah's own bloodline is at stake. Tamar returns to her father's house, a widow but still under Judah's legal authority since she is technically engaged to his youngest son. She is not free to marry another man. Time passes. The third son grows up, but Judah does not have him marry Tamar. She remains alone and destitute. And Tamar makes a plan. She goes to a place where she knows she will run into Judah, the entrance to the city Enaim. She covers herself with a veil and waits. Judah arrives. He doesn't recognize Tamar in her disguise and takes her to be a prostitute. He asks to come to bed with her, offering to send a goat as payment later. Tamar demands collateral in the form of Judah's seal and staff. And biblical scholar Robert Alter compares this to somebody today handing over their driver's license and credit cards. Recklessly, Judah agrees. And with that exchange, Judah goes to bed with Tamar and she conceives. Tamar returns to her father's home. Judah tries in vain to find the mysterious woman he slept with, to hand over the promised goat and reclaim his seal and staff, but eventually he gives up. 3 months later, Judah hears that his daughter-in-law is pregnant. Thinking that she has betrayed his third son, her betrothed, Judah responds with two terse words, "Hotziyuha v'tisaref," take her out and burn her. No questions, no trial, no discussion. Judah doesn't even attempt to see Tamar. Take her out and burn her. Tamar sends Judah his own seal and staff with a message, "I am pregnant by the man to whom these belong. Recognize them? Whose are these?" Judah recognizes the seal and staff as his own. He responds with a remarkable line, "Tzedakah mimeni," she is more right than I. Judah admits that he was wrong, that he mistreated Tamar by withholding his youngest son from her. Tamar gives birth to twins, which the story presents as her long-awaited justice. One of her sons, Perez, will become the progenitor of the line of King David. Tamar's story is explosive. To modern ears, perhaps, nobody in this narrative acts righteously. There is deeply troubling stuff in here. Abuses of power, sex by deception. It is not an easy story. That Tamar and Judah are the ancestors of the royal Davidic line feels ludicrous, even offensive. To ears familiar with the literary style and social context of the Torah, the story upends biblical motifs. We are accustomed to romantic meet-cutes and betrothals at wells. Here, the city Enaim, which means double wells, is the site of a bald proposition. We are accustomed to goats used for deception, as Jacob puts a goat hide on his hands to deceive his father. Here, a goat is proffered as sincere payment for services rendered. We are accustomed to our matriarch struggles with infertility. Here, a woman is denied children not by God, but by ordinary men. Yet it is somehow through this topsy-turvy story that we learn what real-world righteousness looks like. Neither the Torah text nor the centuries of rabbinic commentary condemn Tamar. Rather, she's celebrated. A woman who demands to be treated fairly and takes what she is owed through trickery. Traditional commentators argue that Tamar's actions were noble and right, and the fact that she is the foremother of the line of David proves it. But if Tamar acted honorably, why is she so slow to reveal what she had done? Rashi writes that Tamar communicated indirectly, delicately, in order to not publicly embarrass Judah. She sends him his seal and staff, saying, "I am pregnant by the man to whom these belong," rather than, "I am pregnant by you," to allow Judah to save face. Rashi connects this to the Talmudic teaching that a man should allow himself to be cast in a fiery furnace before shaming another. Perhaps it was out of respect for Judah's reputation that Tamar approached him so gently. Or perhaps she realized that her fate lay in the hands of a man she knew to be impulsive and rash. Her shocking boldness in sleeping with Judah and her discretion in revealing what she had done were two sides of the same coin, the shrewd strategy of someone in a precarious position. Tamar maneuvers carefully to get what she is owed. Asserting that tzedakah mimeni, she is more right than I, Judah uses the root tzadi dalet kuf. This is the root of the words tzedek, justice or righteousness, tzedakah, charity, and tzadik, righteous one. Here, Judah recognizes Tamar's relative tzedek. Notably, Judah does not say tzedakah, she is right. Rather, tzedakah mimeni, she is more right than I. Arguably, there's no moral purity in this story. But of course, in the real world, we rarely find moral purity. Nonetheless, we find righteousness. Tamar teaches that righteousness doesn't mean passively accepting a bad lot, throwing up our hands and saying, "I guess this is what God wanted." Rather, righteousness means diving into the dirty business of being human and making the world a little fairer. This is the first lesson Tamar teaches us. She is a model of clear-headedness, tenacity, and yes, craftiness. Within the injustice of a system in which a widow must have a son to save herself, Tamar forces the hand of Judah, the man who has withheld her sole chance for survival. In our messy world, like Tamar's, egos pervade and power struggles abound. People are unfairly blamed for tragedies out of their control. God's presence is not always readily apparent. Often, moral redemption is faltering, partial, and slow, but people can change. When the biblical camera next pans to Judah, he is a genuinely changed man, interacting with Joseph and Jacob in a totally different way. And Judah's transformation begins with tzedakah mimeni, she is more right than I. But Judah cannot become a great leader until he does right by Tamar. This is the second lesson of Tamar's story. Decency must come first. Protecting the widow isn't a nice aspiration that Israel can put on the back burner. Today, thankfully, we've moved past levirate marriage, but the principle has never wavered in millennia of Jewish tradition. Providing for the vulnerable, the powerless, is absolutely core to who Israel must be. Once Judah accepts this, he can move on with his story. And once we accept this, that we cannot be a great nation if we are not first decent people, we can move on with ours. So let this be our first prayer, not for greatness, but for a nudge towards goodness.